Get ready, because here it comes. Intro to Trim. This is one of the most useful tools in Avid. We will cover purpose of trim, understanding handles, entering trim mode, and exiting trim mode. This is trim mode. If you use the GUI interface of Avid, you would come down to right here where you have the little trim roller icon, and that's entering trim mode. This same icon is on your U key on the keyboard, and that would be a quicker way to get into trim mode, but you'll always have to remember to enable the tracks you want to trim on. A quicker way to enable your tracks and go into trim mode would be to lasso the transition or transitions, and you would be in trim mode and with those tracks enabled for editing. Trimming is a basic function to manipulate the footage within the timeline to make it easier to frame accurately, fine-tune your shots quickly. Another way to look at trim is like on film, since Avid was based on the film industry. When you're trimming, you're basically rolling through your footage and placing your trim rollers where we used to have to cut on film. We can now do this all in our timeline with digital editing. To be able to trim accurately and where you want, you definitely need handle. So let's go into that and show you what that is. Handle is basically the footage on either side of your trim or your markers. When you mark a shot in the source window, what's on either side of those marks will be your handle. So as you can imagine, it's always good to have handle, not only for trimming, but for effects. So you'll notice when we're on set and we're shooting something, we don't always hit the record button and go right into the shot. We usually wait a few seconds, and that's usually to establish the shot and get that handle that we may need to zoom in on the shot, or say slow transition effect, fade in. And we always need handle to do this to our liking. So again, look at this picture. Notice this kind of gives a demonstration of what handle is. It's literally the rolled up footage on both sides of your shot. These represent your trim rollers down here. So trim rollers, and just imagine handle is the footage outside of what you end up putting in your shot. So later we would be able to trim this one way or another. So basically handle is just that extra footage of the same take that we have on both sides. So now that you got trim down and you know what handle is used for, let's go into getting out of trim. Of course, a recap real quick. You can hit the control key when you're inside a sequence, which brings this pointer into a box. Notice I'm just hitting the control key. If you want to get into trim mode, put a wireframe around. Again, let's show that again. I'm hitting the control key just because I'm inside here. Normally from the gray area you could definitely draw a wireframe around your cuts, but inside a bigger sequence you hit the control key and then you can quickly get into that mode. And notice it deselected the video track. So whenever you're going into trim mode this way, which is drawing a wireframe around the cut, you can easily just get into those tracks that you want to edit on. The other way that I showed you to get into trim mode was to go to your GUI interface below the fast menu in your composer, and it'll go into trim mode on whatever you have selected over here. If I wanted to select those, I could select them after the fact. But remember, going into trim mode this way, you have to select the tracks you want to actually go into trim mode on, and it goes to the closest cut to whatever your blue bar is in the sequence. So if I have it over here, And notice I'm not even by the cut. I'm just a little ways away from it, and I go into trim mode. It goes to the closest cut of where your blue bar is in the timeline. But again, notice my audio over here isn't selected. Another way to go into trim is to draw a wireframe around, and it selects the tracks that you've drawn the wireframe around. It's just click in the empty space and draw around that area. Of course, I showed you hitting the control key to make it easier in bigger stacks of tracks. To get out of trim mode, you can either select the timecode track, and that's the quick way to get out of any tool in Avid for the most part. And my preferred method, that's why I put the timecode track between my audio tracks and my video tracks, just so I could easily get out of trim mode. Again, just click. I'm just clicking in this timecode track, and it gets me out of trim. Another way to get out of trim is from the keyboard. So let's bring up that keyboard real quick. If you want to get out of trim from the keyboard, notice I'm on these tracks, and you can select any of these. Move forward. This is 1 frame forward, 10 frames forward and backward. If you select that, notice down here in my timeline, I can get out of trim mode quickly that way too. So the navigation buttons, these 1 through 4, will get you out of trim mode just as well. So either click in the timecode track to get out of trim, or of course I'm now just hitting the 1, 2, 3, or 4 key, and it will get me out of trim by selecting that. So this concludes the bare bones intro to trim. Stay tuned for more detail on the same.